The King of the Battlefield Chapter 171. Chapter 171, Wang Chunglin, 1. Translation, Te. Edit, Li Suras. Ugh. Instead, he vomited up blood. Great Assassin number 10. There were countless needles in his body. With his first showy attacks, he distracted his opponent and attacked, and if even that was blocked, the long needles inside the back of his hand would fly out and attack his opponent's fatal point. He hasn't changed. Myung had narrowly avoided it, but it was important that he had blocked the assassination. The Great Assassin was a shadow designed to face humanity's top 10 strongest. But, he only knew how to face them by assassination. Of course, if the assassination was unsuccessful, the expectation would drop significantly. This was the reason why Myung was able to erase the forest of death in the past. He had cut most of them down head-on, without giving them much time to kill. Because Myung also had 4 classes at that time, he wasn't very weak in the head-on confrontation. However, Myung had also died in the process. It was because the traps he had set up in doubles and triples using all of his might had been easily penetrated by Wang Chunglin. There is no need for traps anymore. If the Great Assassins were able to kill the humanity's top 10 strongest in a head-on confrontation, then humanity's strongest group would be the Forest of Death. However, if the assassins were identified and fought openly, 5 Great Assassins would have to gather to deal with one of the 10 strongest. Furthermore, people like Dragon Lord Hansung were out of the question. Also, Myung's military force was ranked among the 10 strongest. This was a simple calculation, and if he used all his skills he would easily be among the top ranked. There was no need for him to set a trap and wait for his opponent to be caught in it. Myung would seek them out. Myung knew all the paths of the game like the back of his hand. Now, Wang Chunglin on the other hand, had set a trap to catch Myung. He wiped his mouth. He had gotten caught once on purpose. It was like a greeting between the Great Assassins. Let's do this properly. However, one greeting was sufficient. He slowly pulled out anguish. Swung. Before he knew it, the sky was darkening as the sun set. In the low dusk, Myung's sword burned with the last flame. Wilderness. Soon, the world was influenced by Myung's color. A violent sandstorm blew in. Payok. Myung unfurled Gabriel's wings. 3 horns sprouted on top of Myung's head. Quack quack quack. Number 10 stretched out his hands as he felt something strange. Then, countless needles gushed out from the back of his hand. Strong poison and magical powers were overlaid so that a fair amount of skin would be pierced at once. Myung covered his body with his wings. Gabriel's wings represented justice. All the power to justify Myung's actions were in these wings. Kwa-a-a-a-a-a-a-a-ok. Number 10 jumped into the air and spun his entire body like a top. Thousands, tens of thousands of needles started to pour down like rain. Mass destruction. It was number 10's main ability and his strongest attack. Those who died from this method numbered in the thousands. Myung released his wings. Then he wielded anguish and met all the attacks. In a world that was moving 8 times faster, anguish cut down thousands of needles one by one. A move that could be called superhuman. It was literally none other than a head-on confrontation. In the meanwhile, Myung moved one step at a time. However, he continued to keep his eyes on number 10. Was that all he could do? It was a rebuke. Then, numerous needles squirmed inside the 10th's entire body. The needles stimulated his entire body and awakened number 10. A high-risk technique. It was number 10's strongest technique that reduced his lifespan by about 10 years, but also strengthened his body by that much. Originally, number 10 had to run away after his assassination had failed. That was the guideline for all assassins. However, number 10 did not run away. He couldn't run away. This place was inside of Myung's barrier, in the middle of his wilderness. A place that maximized all essences. In this place, Muyeong looked different than before. An enormous body that was close to 2 m and 3 pairs of wings that seemed huge enough to touch the sky. Anguish had also grown large enough to match his body. On the other hand, what about number 10? Are you afraid of me? Number 10 was the same. However, Muyeong could tell that his soul was trembling violently. Muyeong played with anguish. Number 10 blocked, but his moves were inadequate. As Muyeong flapped his wings, an intense typhoon blew in that direction. Dozens of tornadoes rose and hit number 10 hard. From the get-go, number 10 was unable to defeat Muyeong in a head-on confrontation. The same was true even if they were not in his wilderness. Number 10's entire body began to break into pieces. The art of death. Soon, the whines died down. Only bits of flesh littered the ground. In that state, Muyeong started to create something. He studied number 10's soul until he got to the bottom of it. He tried to discover his essence. Swag. Muyeong erased the score. It wasn't something made for someone's appraisal. He had no desire for it to be judged. This was only for Muyeong and the assassins. It was a soundless song that only Muyeong and the assassins could know. Kai-a-a-a-a-ok. The pieces of flesh joined together and formed one shape. At first glance, it looked like a large dog. The problem was that it was around the size of a decent adult, however it had shaggy fur and tail. The fur was as hard as steel. As soon as it was touched, it would bore through everything, and the dog could control the hair on its entire body freely. Number 10 liked dogs. The dog number 10 had been with since childhood had died when he turned 15. It could be said that the dog had lived a long life, but number 10 had lived his entire life with his dead dog in his heart. However, Muyeong couldn't find number 10's image. Muyeong was only able to find a dog engraved into his soul. I am sorry I couldn't find who you are. Muyeong extended his hand. He petted the dog's hair. The strong fur softened for a moment. It was normal for it to bore through everything, but Muyeong was the only exception. From now on, I will call you 10. Bark. 10 affirmed it. Soon, Muyeong released the wilderness. Although he had extreme dehydration, Muyeong finished it with a shake of his head. Muyeong watched 10. He made 10, and there were things he learned naturally. Find your siblings, 10. Diablo's altar shook. In front of it, the Vestal's eyes were closed. Then she muttered to herself. Number 10 has fallen. I know. A heavy voice rang. Perhaps it was a voice she had heard somewhere before. A voice that sometimes sounded feminine and sometimes masculine. Sometimes he was like an adult and other times he was like a child. An utterly unpredictable being. The master who led the forest of death was here, in close range. The Vestal continued speaking without care. He can join the cause with us. He gives off a dangerous vibe. Like myself, we definitely have to get rid of him. Didn't I say it? That strictly speaking, he is like your disciple. Disciple. The shadow snorted. Afterwards, he spoke mockingly. You said you saw the future. The destruction of the world, the subsequent descent of false gods. A world where everything you believed disappeared and only lies remained. That's right. The forest of death that you led disappeared, and after that there was chaos itself. The world, the universe, all dimensions received destruction. I am just a shadow. You found and you desired for me. It was only a slightly different wish than the others. Stop the destruction of the world. But I am sure. He's the one that will destroy the world. He is not similar to my disciples. The shadow stuck to his guns. The Vestal sighed. He is a blessed being. From light and darkness, chaos, and everything else. You, a mere shadow, can never be victorious in a fight with him. Are you sure? The shadow laughed. He had no thoughts of losing. He now knew Muyeong as well as Muyeong knew him. The Vestal had seen the future and said that the shadow would be defeated. But there was nothing absolute in the world. The Vestal spoke anxiously. Do not oppose him. You cannot defeat him. He is a shadow like me. The shadow gradually faded away. He left a final word. So, the deeper one will survive. The attack of the monsters began. Numerous undead filled the mountain. That number was well over 10,000s. Build up a line of defense. Protect the priests. Serafina and Ramiela were struggling. However, the attacks of the enemy were endless. Even worse, if they were killed by undead, they themselves would become undead. The holy city of Malalan. It was something that could never happen to warriors blessed by God. Divine power was literally divine strength. It was incompatible with death and could never be invaded by evil. That should be the case, but the paladins and the priests became undead and started to rise again. Furthermore, if a priest died, he would transform into a dark priest that could restore the undead. On the other hand, Malalan's priests and paladins were unable to use divine power. If they did, the undead reversed that strength, absorbing it and becoming stronger. A hollow fortress. Of course, there was no way that a proper fight could proceed. What about reinforcements? Are there no replies from the other cities? It was a situation where Serafina and Ramiela had sent out an SOS to other cities besides Malalan. As they had asked for help in the name of Malalan, they wouldn't be able to just ignore it. However, it was important to endure for that time. Retreat. Serafina. I will stop the front. In the end, they couldn't win against a fight of attrition. Even though their numbers were similar, they were undead that didn't fear death. They continuously increased tirelessly. Even more, no divine powers worked either. What's that? The sky. However, retreat didn't seem easy either. In a moment, the sky was black. A huge shadow was eating up all of the sky's light. Bone Dragon. The highest class of undead. Because they were made of dragon's bones, the name given to them was a bone dragon. 2 bone dragons flew in the sky. And several shadows jumped to the ground from on top of it. The shadows rapidly dispersed and killed their troops. No one dared to stop a shadow. Jake. Ramiela gave a short cry. It was because in the shadow's attack, her side had been open. Her first knight had hurriedly blocked it, but it had only bought them some time. Myung Nim. Serafina gritted her teeth. She believed that there was a reason that Myung was missing. Myung was hope. She just hoped and prayed that nothing would happen to that hope. 5 shadows passed the hill. Among them, 2 flowed into the demon god's territory and found a territory. It was a place where all kinds of species including Dakibus lived. 2 shadows invaded that place and began to massacre. Another one headed for the great city. It entered the luminescent guild and found Kim Ti-wan there. The other 2 were heading towards the Fighting King and B. Suzy. A move to cut off everyone connected to Myung. The remaining 4 dealt with Malalan. They found Serafina and caught the ferry. Myung, who had moved with 10, could also feel that. The feeling of the connected threads breaking one by one. Wang Chunglin. That bastard also knew Myung now. Myung had to choose what method he would take. However, one thing was certain, Myung was not feeling very good right now. Chapter 172, Wang Chunglin, 2. Translation, Te. Edit, Li Suras. The territory was full of energy. Apart from the natural problems posed by different creatures associating and living together, it could be said that Deputy Lord Bolton and Sahun were doing their best work. The population that had stagnated for a short while after the Devil's Long Night had increased exponentially as time passed. Most of all, the combination of the dwarves' craftsmanship and the knowledge of the humans was more than enough to protect the ever-increasing number of citizens. Although it was normal for people to become lazy when the basic needs were cared for, Baltan and Sahun did not let this come about. We must achieve more before our lord returns. Sahun was particularly zealous. Sahun was the chief of the Dakibas. As a Duaxini that had evolved from a Dakibi, he never refused to take the lead if something happened. But Sahun's mind was urgent. The emergence of a new strong person, Arund. Territory Guardian Baltan's growth was also increasing daily. On the other hand, for some reason, Sahun felt as if he was marching in place. So, he wanted to contribute a remarkable achievement in his own way. Increase the territory. Our enemies do not exist where resides. The main task was precisely expanding the territory. The territory's population had passed 50,000. Most of the races living in the demon god's territory reproduced rapidly, but as they grew, the weak usually died. However, the people whose food, clothing, and shelter were taken care of under the territory were only growing endlessly. More still, there were immigrants flowing in from the outside, and at this rate, the land would soon be scarce. Sahun therefore intended to increase the land available. Among the Dakibas that numbered over 20,000, there were only 10 other Duaxinis like Sahun. Sees a far path different from us. We should be of aid. The Dakibas worshipped and Hum. Was the king of the Dakibas, and Muyung was However, Sahun thought that Muyung was no ordinary He was perhaps the most powerful in all of history. Sahun could not catch up at all to the pace of Muyung's advancement. He couldn't even figure out the path Muyung wanted to take. Muyung's judgment was so completely different from Sahun's. Sahun couldn't see even the short lines of the picture Muyung drew. But, he wanted to be helpful. In order to do that, he was prepared to jump into the heat of the fire. Sahun looked at the front. That place was a forest that was close to the territory. An area where superior monsters called Naga was located. Monsters whose upper bodies were human-like, and whose lower halves were shaped like enormous snakes. Strange. However, the forest was so quiet. He was accompanied by around 10,000 Dakibas, but they didn't see any Naga at all. But there was a disgusting smell. The smell of rotting corpses. It also reeked of foul entrails. Urk. A shadow. A shadow has. At the same time, the Dakibis in the rear screamed. Sahun turned his head with a frown. He didn't see any shadows. However, the moment he looked away, his companions disappeared. Even Duaxinis were among those that disappeared. An assassination. But he didn't know who the opponent was. Everyone, stand together. We have to catch the shadow. Sahun was enraged. Although it was a foreboding affair and normally he would have retreated, Sahun was stubborn. It was because he felt an unknown evil. It was because for some reason, there was a smell similar to Muyung's that reeked all around. More than 200 Dakibas had disappeared in just 2 hours. Show yourself. Sahun gritted his teeth and thoroughly searched his surroundings. Rustle. A blade of grass a short distance away trembled slightly. There you are. Sahun quietly gripped his weapon and immediately sprang forward. Poof! An enormous rod split the air. However, there was a man wearing a black mask riding on top of the rod. Sahun immediately realized that it was the masked man that had attacked the Dakibas. The bastard isn't a shadow. Catch him and kill him. As Sahun shouted, numerous Dakibas attacked. The bastard couldn't escape now. No matter how agile he was surrounded by Dakibas. More so as they found out that he wasn't a shadow, there was no easy escape for him. Quang! Quang! The surrounding terrain was destroyed with each swing of Sahun's weapon. His opponent avoided all of the attacks but was being driven into a corner. It was no different from a hunt. Sahun gave a satisfied smile. Thud! He slowly looked down at his chest. A long sword was penetrating his heart. There wasn't only one of them. Sahun had been careless. He hadn't thought that there might be 2 of them making a move. It was because the scars were the same as the ones of the dead Dakibus. Sahun took hold of the situation with both hands. Slash! His arm was cut off. Let Baltan and Arund know about this. Sahun completely changed his mind. The masked men were strong. If there were two, they could not be caught by the Dakibus alone. However, there wasn't only Sahun and the Dakibus in the territory. If they knew and prepared, there was no reason they couldn't catch even real shadows. Without caring, a screaming Sahun bit the masked man in the neck. Chomp! Tumble tumble! The moment he bit his neck, his head rolled on the ground. The masked man felt the bite marks on his neck for a moment. One for now. Two remain. Bonk! Soon, the two masked men threw smoke bombs. They were smoke bombs made from materials that dulled the senses and caused confusion. Crack! His arm was broken. Juurk! Kim Ti-wan threw up blood. A dark alley. Kim Ti-wan's condition was terrible. One eye was bleeding, one arm was bizarrely broken and his guts were pouring out of his stomach. A situation where it wouldn't be strange if he died immediately. But he couldn't help but ask. Who sent you? Kim Ti-wan had many enemies. There had been some people that had been upset when Kim Ti-wan was on a roll in the Luminescent Guild. However, he had never felt this much malice before. Soon, the Black Shadow spoke. Muyong. Kim Ti-wan's eyebrows furrowed. Lies. He didn't believe it. It was unbelievable. It was also nonsensical for an assassin to rashly say the name of his client. He knew it was just to cause confusion. Kim Ti-wan wasn't a fool. Now I see. You're associated with Hyung Nim. Pathetic, bastard. Why, of all people, did you meddle with Hyung Nim? He spoke from the heart. There was no one that messed with Muyong and survived. By killing me, do you think Hyung Nim will be shaken? Hyung Nim, even though other people might shake him, he will never shake. Pua! Gayag! As he laughed, he threw up blood again. However, the shadow didn't respond. Instead, he slowly lifted the bloody silver knife. Kim Ti-wan forcibly swallowed his blood. If it was Muyong in this kind of moment, what would he do? As he worried about him, the answer soon came. Kim Ti-wan said with a smile. Kill me for sure. Because if not, I will chew you to death. Urk. Covered in cold sweat, B. Suzy sat up. Who? She quickly wiped her face and slapped her cheek. A nightmare. She'd had a terrible nightmare. She still couldn't get her heart to stop racing. Did you have a bad dream? The man who had laid down near the bonfire turned his head and asked B. Suzy. B. Suzy swallowed her saliva. I have to go back. You can't go back. Now that you have become my disciple, you have to follow me until you have mastered all the divine writings. Didn't I already tell you this? Even so, I have to go back. B. Suzy opened her eyes wide and stared at the muscular man, the Fighting King. Over the past year, B. Suzy had been forced to follow the Fighting King. Because in actuality, she had been kidnapped from the Sky Library. After that, the Fighting King seemed to be searching for something, but he was soon thrilled with B. Suzy's talents and immediately took her in as a disciple. The Fighting King shook his head. You can do whatever you want if you achieve our mystery door. But before that, you have no freedom. How long will that take? At least 8 ranks are needed to attain a mystery door. I achieved 10 ranks, and even the Great Door Master could only achieve up to 11 ranks. However, if it's you, you could achieve rank 12. At this pace, 10 years should be enough to get to 8 ranks. The Fighting King said with pride. As B. Suzy's talent was truly surprising, he got the taste for teaching every day. Someone that could possibly attain the legendary stage of rank 12. Reaching the 8 ranks in 10 years was absurd. Because even the Fighting King took 30 years to get to 8 ranks. In 10 years it will be too late. However, that is the discipline of our mystery door. Ugh! Payayok! A whip flew in. The whip had a strong electrical current. The fighting king grimaced, caught the whip with both hands, and dragged in his opponent in that way. Even with the strong current, it didn't even scratch the fighting king's body. Then, the fighting king smiled at the shadow that had appeared. So, you're one of the assassins of the Forest of Death. The fighting king was searching for the Forest of Death and its master. But, this was how they showed themselves? The fighting king slowly turned his head towards B. Suzy. Take a good look. I will show you the power of our mystery door. The fighting king threw the whip on the ground and got in position. After this, he threw his fist into the air and a strong wave surged forward. Kwa 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 kwang. Myung looked up at the sky. Twilight. But he couldn't hear even the small sound of a bug. Swung. Myung took out anguish. Schwack. Crack. And he cut through the stone walls that blocked the cave. As he entered the cracked cave, priests in black robes looked at Myung. It's the enemy. Stop him. Quack. One person, one step. Myung slowly advanced. There was no hesitation in Myung's hands. He cut down everyone in his way. Although it was a dark cave, it looked as bright as daylight to Myung. Diabolos altar. The place where Myung was currently standing. This place was an altar. It was hidden in such a remote place that hardly anyone knew of its location. Normally, he would have to gather 3 rings to come to this place, but now his purpose had changed. Snow was at the end of this. A saintess who had blocked the armies of the Demon King. However, that was also a story of the past. There was a woman with the wings of both an angel and a devil there at the altar who was now truly unfamiliar. A woman who had helped Myung numerous times but who was now standing in opposition for some reason. Snow, you will have to tell me about your relationship with Wang Chunlin. At first, he had been curious. Why was Snow finding out about Myung? She even seemed to have at least a slight expectation that Myung had come from the future. But now he was even more curious about something else. This was fine in any case. Wang Chunlin. How was that bastard able to find out about those that were associated with Myung? Even more, it seemed that before this situation had arisen he had sent out assassins. If he had been able to know in advance and send them, then the cause could only be Snow. But if Snow truly wanted to maintain a good relationship with Myung, it was only right to exclude Wang Chunlin. Snow. In the past, she was a saintess, but now she was Diabolos Vestal. Obviously, it was a different past from Myung's memory. She, who had strived to save mankind, was now on the opposite side. He didn't know what her connection to Wang Chunlin was, but her journey was so different from in the past. Myung was certainly incredibly curious about what justification Snow would give. Chapter 173, Wang Chunlin, 3. Translation, Te. Edit, Li Suras. The Vestal saw. The destruction of the world. The end. Everything was dark. In the end, nothing remained. Humanity had already been exterminated, and what happened afterwards could be compared to the Big Bang that began creation. No one wanted such a future. However, the Vestal saw a small light in the darkness. Yes, it was truly a small light. However, the Vestal was able to realize that the existence of the light was Myung. The problem was that the light was very weak. It was brighter than any other, but compared to the darkness that had come for the world, it was the light of a firefly. The light is wandering. Myung didn't know his own worth. He only had a vague idea about it. That shouldn't be. More than anything, the light that illuminated the world had to be straightforward. The Vestal saw all the past events. And the shadow snuck a look at all the Vestal's recollections and visions. There it learned about Myung and also his related facts. That fellow isn't like my disciples, Vestal. The shadow rose up to the ceiling and looked down at the altar. The Vestal was on her knees praying continuously. Bastard! Muyong wasn't the shadow's disciple or anything of the sort. But then again, the shadow was someone that didn't exist. He was a being that stayed behind someone's back and moved based on their ambition. Furthermore, as the Vestal saw, Muyong was shining. Shadows didn't shine. Didn't you silently wish for me to do this? I also felt this in your memories and in your heart. The Vestal denied it, but the shadow knew that the Vestal hoped that the shadow would become a trial itself and force Muyong to choose. She had tried to contact the shadow for that one purpose in the first place. She was hoping he would be the catalyst so that the light can proceed in the right direction. In other words, the shadow was an essential obstacle for Muyong to surpass. However, the shadow had no intention of making Muyong into the sun. Muyong, you are the light, but you have the disposition of a shadow like me. Rather, like himself, he wanted Muyong to become a deeper shadow. So first, he took care of it himself. He sent other shadows to people who were associated with Muyong. The Vestal had seen the future, but she didn't know everything. She didn't know that Muyong had the qualities for becoming an even deeper darkness than the shadow himself. No, perhaps she was pretending not to know. Furthermore, the Vestal said that the shadow would lose. However, the shadow had no intention of engaging in even a simple armed fight in the first place. This was a battle of whether Muyong would become darkness or light. If he became darkness, the shadow would be victorious, and if he became light it would be the Vestal's victory. And Muyong's victory? Muyong would be victorious either way. Because he had no choice but to be victorious. From the start, he had the qualities to become anything. Amazing! The shadow couldn't remember being as emotional as this. It seemed that perhaps the Vestal's memories and emotions had been assimilated when he peeked at them. There he had seen Muyong and found out more about him than Muyong knew about himself. Such as Muyong's real name and even what he did on Earth. So the shadow was curious. What would you do if you were confronted with the truth? Something he had never experienced before. Even the shadow was extremely interested in the outcome that would arise. Rumble rumble. The cave shook. Enormous giant statues moved and blocked Muyong. Diabolos! We offer you our bodies. The heretics used the self-sacrifice spell. The bodies of the heretics melted and soon flowed into the giants. They became the material that moved the giants. The self-sacrifice spell was a great magical spell that could only be used once by someone serving a god. The god was able to amplify his ability to influence the world and create something close to a miraculous event. About 100 heretics gave their lives for the self-sacrifice spell. The 5 giants gained superhuman strength. Kwang. Kweruriang. A strong energy surrounded the giants. They had fire, water, wind, earth, and metal energy respectively. Blink. Muyong traveled a short distance in a flash. The blink ability on Isaac's boots. Because he could move indefinitely if his destination was visible, it didn't take much to avoid a large attack. In a flash, Muyong, who had moved behind one of the giants' necks, brandished anguish. Crack! The rock was split. However, it regenerated in an instant. This was because there was the strength of 20 lives sacrificed added to each giant. Tch. Muyong briefly clicked his tongue. While coming this far he had already fought hundreds of monsters. Fatigue was accumulating little by little. The enemy is alone. Assist the giants. The priests of darkness came out in droves. Muyong frowned. If he confronted them head-on, even Muyong would not survive. Nithiag. A horse's leg was severed. Ramiela. Ramiela fell from her horse. Serafina instantly approached Ramiela while wielding a sword. Ramiela's first knight had already become a corpse after being defeated. Because of the shadow, he had died protecting Ramiela. Malalan, cannot lose. Ramiela kept repeating as her face went pale. Malalan was pride. The god they served was absolute. They must never be defeated by evil. However, the evil before them had neutralized even the power of their god. Rather, they had snorted and tried to absorb even that power. They had never been so helpless. Malalan was the icon of justice and all mankind. You have to retreat, Ramiela. Serafina persuaded Ramiela. If they retreated now, it would be possible to at least protect the minimum number of people. But Ramiela shook her head. She put her hand on the ground, got up, and grabbed her bow again. There is no longer anywhere to retreat to. If we retreat here, their power will grow even stronger. Ramiela seemed to have made up her mind. However, it was hard to regain the momentum that had already been lost. Every time the bone dragon exhaled, thousands of priests melted. The paladins' shields and armor also melted easily. My god! Everyone called on their god. Serafina was the same. However, they couldn't win. Even so, she couldn't go and leave Ramiela behind. Serafina raised her sword again. And the moment she ran towards the shadows and the bone dragon. Kwa-a-a-a-a! A huge typhoon formed in the sky. Soon, a black sphere fell to the ground and swallowed everything up like a black hole. A divine bolt of lightning struck the surroundings and burned up many of the undead. What the hell? Something that happened suddenly. Serafina turned her head. Soon, she could see two horses. A hell horse and a unicorn. There were other undead joining them. Undead attacking undead. It was a situation she was seeing for the first time, and Serafina was dumbfounded. In that situation, someone burst out from the ground. Please do not worry. We are servants of Muyeong Nim. A lich. Serafina took a step backwards. A strong evil energy was flowing out of the man before her. However, a similarly strong divine power could also be felt. We are Muyeong Nim's servants. The man said again. Then Serafina opened her eyes widely. Gale was a fabricated alias. The angel's name was Muyeong. Serafina knew him. Please relax. The man, B. Sungmin, picked up his staff. Kwang! 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 When he pointed the staff repeatedly, explosions occurred here and there around him. When he used his other hand, the fallen people in the surroundings began to be healed. The enemy undead couldn't absorb B. Sungmin's divine powers. Seeing that, Serafina shuddered. Up until now, she had half disbelieved the prophecy. The person with black wings will destroy the world. One more thing had been added after that. The one with the white wings will save the world with his servants. Kwang! The sword that tried to pierce his neck was stopped. You're right on time. Kim Ti-wan opened his eyes, which had been closed. A man made of bone and a vampire covered in a cloak were side by side. It was precisely Taken and Kala. They stopped the shadow's attack and began to talk to each other. Teleport. I just imitated it. Without your magic it would have been difficult to travel this distance. Taken shrugged his shoulders. He hadn't been sure if it would work, but it seemed to have turned out well. You weren't just stealing swordsmanship? There's nothing like a thief, hey. In any case, that bastard Muyeong made me, and it seems he added even more skills. Anyway, you calling me a thief is not nice to hear. Kala clicked his tongue. Taken could steal the majority of the skills he saw. This was also true for the teleport skill that Alexandro Quintart used. On the other hand, there was no way to steal Muyeong's acceleration or ability to read grains. Taken spoke shortly to Kala. Also, this is a secret. This is a trump card I've saved to beat that bastard. The person he called a bastard was Muyeong. Taken's goal had already become Muyeong. Do as you wish. However, he is an extremely sinister man. Kala turned his head to look at the shadow. The shadow had slipped into position and had finished preparing to attack. When he used his teleport skill to the place where Myung's magic was the most strongly entangled, he arrived at the current situation. Takan secretly looked Kim Tae-won over. Let's end this quickly. He's going to die soon. If he dies, can't I just take him and turn him into an undead? Myung wants him to be alive. He does? Kala asked, as if caught by surprise. Why did Myung, who used the dead, want with a living person? Takan shook his head. Myung wants the warmth. That was the conclusion Takan had come to. They dug into the cave. They ruthlessly cut down anyone in their way. Should I help you? Lucy Fair, who was existing inside Myung, whispered. This was the first time that Lucy Fair, who had been quiet up until now, made a proposal. I will do it alone. However, Myung shook his head. Anguish became even bloodier. Lucy Fair jeered. It was foolish to go all the way to the end of this cave without his help. Myung was also fully aware of that fact. However, Myung would never give up. When Myung finally reached the end of the cave, Lucy Fair had no choice but to stop jeering. Diabolo Salter. At that place, there was a woman on her knees praying. Black and white wings coexisting. With his entire body covered in wounds, Myung looked at the scene. You're finally here. The Vestal slowly rose from her prayer. Her face was no different from Myung's memory. If there was a difference, it could be said that she looked a little bit more mature. Snow. The Vestal smiled sadly. You have passed every trial. In the end, you chose the correct path. You saved your colleagues and didn't refuse to come all this way. Are you saying you planned everything? Please calm your anger. Everything was for your sake. Furthermore, you should know it. The future that will happen. The future. Myung laughed. With this, he was certain. She could see the future. Perhaps, she had also returned like Myung. And she knew more than Myung did. The world had been destroyed. Because of the 72 demon gods and the false gods. In the underworld, angels and true gods don't exist. Isn't it a fact that you knew all this and turned away? Even the divine power that the priests of Malalan use is not the power of a true god either. The Vestal reached out her hands. Soon, their surroundings changed and the future destruction of the world was displayed. The whole universe disappeared. A world where all but utter darkness existed. I have seen it. You would have seen it to some extent as well. Because we had the same dream. Dream. Yes, like me, you only had a dream that was a little long. Snow was thinking of the past that Myung had suffered as a dream. But Myung never dismissed it as a dream. It was a torturous reality. Even if he wanted to avoid it, he couldn't. But she called it a dream. Myung thought of the Snow of the past. Everything had been in a veil. However, Snow had been Myung's target for assassination. Because of this, he'd watched Snow closer than anyone. The Snow of the past had been extremely practical and devoted. To the end, Snow had been the one moving to help even if it was for only one person. As he came all this way, he kept having doubts. However, you two will know now. In the end, you can't save everyone. No matter how much you try to, you have limits. If I help you, you will be able to burn with an even brighter light. She, who had been so devoted to mankind, had reached out to evil. She had dismissed the entire past she had suffered as a dream and was trying to create a completely different path. He couldn't save everyone. Now that he was face to face with the Vestal, he knew. You're not really Snow. Swung. Myung pulled out Anguish. Chapter 174, Wang Chunglin, End. Translation, Te. Edit, Ren. The Snow in front of him had the appearance of the Snow in his memories. But that was all. Her substance was completely different. He wasn't saying she was fake simply because her arguments were different from in the past. Myung sincerely thought that the person before him was not Snow. Then, Snow's face stiffened. You could become an even stronger light. Didn't we dream the same dream? Do you want history to repeat itself? History repeating itself. Humanity would be destroyed once again. If she said that the demon gods gained power and killed even Myung, of course Myung would change the past. However, I am not the light. Furthermore, it's not a dream. Don't you want to know about your true self? I mean, yourself before you came to the underworld. Thud. Myung stopped in his tracks. Himself before he came to the underworld. Certainly, even the name Myung that he was using right now was not his real name. He had absolutely no memories of before he came to the underworld. He would be lying if he said he wasn't curious. Even so, Myung shook his head. I don't want to know. The present moment was important. A resolution that he had made ever since the forest of death had been erased and he returned to the past. The name Myung was enough. He didn't need anything else. He could create his true self from now on. Also, now Myung was taking on his own uniqueness, the only one that existed in the world. Nothing else could replace Myung. Snow's expression changed subtly, to a face that wasn't smiling, crying, or even hardened. What do you want? Do you really want to become a shadow? Why are you trying to judge my identity? Because I saw everything about you. Therefore, I can tell. Myung grinned. He knew the reason for her frustration. The self-titled Snow might certainly know Myung better than he knew himself. But no matter how far she had seen, she was talking only about the surface. Snow didn't know what kind of mind Myung lived with day by day. She didn't know how frantically and how stingily he lived. Even breathing was often painful. Flashes of the past tormented him when he closed his eyes. However, Myung never expressed himself. As the saying goes, the past was important. The fact that the present Myung had been created by the past could not be denied. However, he couldn't make the mistake of forgetting to move forward while looking only at the past. Therefore, Myung always only faced forward. Forcing himself to pretend that he didn't know that the past was gripping his shoulders from behind, he was only concentrating on running forward. You don't know. Snow didn't know this. However, if he had to decide on one identity, there was one word Myung liked. I will become neither light nor darkness. Not good, not evil, a definition that was Myung's alone. Then, Snow's body shivered. Could something exist while being neither light nor darkness? The world was formed in those two. Of course it was fundamental to base things on those two. However, Myung's response was a little different. The absolute. Waaak. His wings sprouted. Myung had 3 pairs of wings. From the top there were white, grey, and black wings, and now, those 3 pairs of wings were starting to be harmonious. Eventually, all 3 pairs would be grey. It was corrupt but not corrupt. Myung had simply established his own justice. Due to Gabriel's authority, Myung would never be corrupted. Snow, who saw his wings, shouted in amazement. I beg you. The path you want to take is chaos. There is nothing at the end of it and nothing can come of it. Did you say you saw the future? Step. Step. Myung walked. If the path he wanted to take right now was chaos, then her words wouldn't be wrong. However, he didn't like that confident tone of her voice. The future changed. It was not decided. So Myung asked one question. What will you look like in 3 seconds? Wait. Sozak. Myung's body disappeared. And the place he appeared was directly above Snow. Before Snow could even react, Myung's anguish cut the top of her head. Indeed, something that happened in a flash. When Myung landed on the ground, Snow's entire body was split in 2 like firewood. Thud. He didn't even need 3 seconds. Myung wiped off anguish as Snow fell to the ground. The energy of death. But soon, Myung couldn't help frowning, because a large amount of death's energy could be felt coming from Snow's body. Swa-a-a-a-a-a. Black smoke rose up from out of Snow's corpse. Blood seeped into the floor and created a six-pointed shape. Crack! Crack! The ceiling started to crack, an indication that the cave was going to collapse. But Myung was focusing on the altar. Is this your answer? Rumble rumble rumble. Cray-a-ok. The ground shook. Cracks appeared here and there. The six-pointed shape was like a symbol of the demon god's token. And Myung had seen a six-pointed shape like that multiple times before. The Star of David. A mark that came out when the demon gods were summoned. When he had entered Gremari's temple at the Blue Temple, that mark had been there. Snow had used even her own existence as a medium, so an extremely dangerous being had been summoned. Its body was well over 10 m tall. It had red skin and giant goat horns. At first glance, it looked like a dragon, but it was quite different. As it stood on 2 feet and let out an eerie shriek, flames hotter than hell soared up everywhere. Myung seemed to know that being. Diablo. The 73rd demon god was born into this world. The ground ruptured. As the sky turned red, it was like a sign of the end of the world. The other 72 demon gods felt the wave of the violent soul. They knew it was the emergence of a new demon god. At the same time, they could also tell how destructive of a demon god Diablo was. Like water and oil, they could not be mixed. Diablo was going to destroy everything. Of course, he would have no choice but to confront other demon gods in the process. Baal. As the first demon god, he sat on a great throne and saw that place for the first time. Thud. As he tapped the throne with his finger, a black bolt of lightning burst out and struck Diablo. Gwerururiung. As the size of the lightning bolt was to the extent that it covered a mountain, Diablo was forced to stagger. But he was unscathed. Tap. Tap. Baal tapped the throne twice. Then a tidal wave, which seemed like it could cover the world, approached. The tidal wave swallowed Diablo. Everything around him was cleanly devoured. Kwa-a-a-a-ong. However, Diablo broke through even the tidal wave. Red wings unfolded and he rose up into the sky. At that moment, the sky became even redder. Gwerurururiung. Soon, many fireballs poured down like rain around him. Everything was aflame and even Baal's eyes were disturbed in the blaze. Even the flames of hell were no match. Diablo's flame was like an extremely pure source. Eventually, when Baal tapped the throne 3 times, Diablo suddenly disappeared like smoke. Baal closed his eyes, as if nothing had happened. After 10 minutes at most. Following the mountain-sized black lightning bolt and the tidal wave that seemed to cover the world, everything was evaporated by Diablo's flames. All that remained was an infinitely burning land. Myung cleared away the wreckage and got up. Baal. Myung could sense that it had been Baal who had attacked the 73rd demon god Diablo. He was the only one that could attack at this scale from an unseen location. No one had ever seen Baal, but his attacks were dared to be associated with the word extraordinary, a level that could overpower the great city with one attack. Baal attacked Diablo. Myung noted that fact. Baal, who could be called the true king of the 72 demon gods, had made a move. It meant that Diablo's emergence had offended him that much. Because Baal had noticed as soon as Diablos appeared and attacked. Fight fire with fire. Suddenly, those words came to mind. A way to suppress poison with another poison. He had made a powerful move to contain the 72 demon gods. However, Myung, who had suffered from Diablo for just a short moment, had no choice but to shake his head. Even if Diablo was keeping the demon gods in check, he would only continue to be a destructive being. Myung could feel Diablo's desire to paint this world with his fire. He's extreme. Myung looked around. The six-pointed shape had been left in the place where the demon god had emerged. It was called the Star of David and it was left behind at trials related to the demon gods. The staircase heading beneath the altar caught Muyoung's eye. A soft light was there. The black light escaped from the place where Snow's body was and the small light left at the end flowed towards the staircase. Pyorong! Pyorong! The armful cradle's spirit that had been hiding in Muyoung's hair reacted. The armful cradle wanted Muyoung to go down the stairs. You mean there's something down there? The world was engulfed in flames. Diabolo's flames made the skin burn just by being next to it. He certainly didn't know what was in there, but Muyoung slowly took a step forward. As he continued down the steps beneath the altar, another large temple appeared. It looked magnificent, as if it had been made beforehand. Sculptures of Diabolo had been erected everywhere. Gasp! At that moment, Muyoung turned his body like a top. It was because someone behind him had tried to assassinate him. The back of his neck was cold. It was clear that he had almost lost his neck, just like that. There was not even a 0.1 second difference. As he hastily withdrew anguish, Muyoung stepped back and looked at his opponent. Diabolo carries the Origin's flame, so the rewards will also be beyond imagination. Do you not covet it? The opponent, who had tried to assassinate him, spoke in a laid-back manner. However, when Muyoung saw his opponent, he trembled slightly. In that state, he darted forward as he was. Wang Chunglin. No reply was needed. There was no need for words between them. The shadow, Wang Chunglin, appeared. With his face as it was in Muyoung's memory. How could they speak gently? It was indeed the state of meeting an enemy on a single log bridge. Muyoung had waited and waited for this moment. Wang Chunglin stopped when Muyoung emerged. But he was bare-handed. Instead, his hands were shining white. Minority ball. It was a technique that most firmly supported the hands. It shined white like that if one was a sage. Muyoung had also mastered it in the past, but he had been unable to become a sage. Shaiik. Wang Chunglin's smile revealed his teeth. Jiu. Jiang. It was an extremely violent collision. Muyoung's sword narrowly cut Wang Chunglin's collar. The long black traditional jacket that Wang Chunglin was wearing shook precariously. Really? Can you see my attacks? Wang Chunglin glanced down at Muyoung with slight admiration. Muyoung's attack was extremely fierce. As Muyoung's horns appeared, it was not the collar, but the skin that started to be cut. Muyoung knew about all of Wang Chunglin's movements. It was a matter of course. He had seen it for dozens of years, so he couldn't help but know. Furthermore, Muyoung's skills now slightly exceeded the past. Even in the past state he had killed Wang Chunglin, so couldn't he just kill him now? Quack! One of Wang Chunglin's arms flew into the air. Chapter 175, Exist Alone, 1. Translation, Nadu and Te. Edit, Ren. Muyoung raised up to 3 horns. In a world that had been accelerated 8 times, he could see Wang Chunglin's movements clearly. For decent humanity's 10 strongest, 3 horns would be enough. Wang Chunglin was still smiling. There was no sign of alarm, even when his arm flew off. This was a completely different face from the past. At the time when Muyoung had just wiped out the forest of death, Wang Chunglin had asked why he had erased the place where they had spent 40 years together. But actually, while his life was at stake, he was calm. Be happy. Most of the shadows I sent died. You won and I lost. Yes. It was precisely that attitude. The reason why Muyoung continuously became ensnared. It's different. It was strange. The image of Wang Chunglin that Muyoung knew and his appearance now didn't coincide. It was doubtful to say that it was because he had met Snow, because it was not easy to change human nature. So, if he thought of Snow as fake, then the Wang Chunglin before his eyes was real. But he seemed to know of his defeat early. Was it resignation? You look disconcerted. Because I look different now from how I did in your memory. Muyong didn't respond. He only looked at Wang Chunlin with a gaze similar to an abyss. Crunch! Wang Chunlin stepped on his own fallen arm. Then he spoke to Muyong. Do you know this? My name is not Wang Chunlin. Muyong's eyebrows furrowed instantly. Wang Chunlin. It was his name that Muyong remembered. In fact, perhaps Muyong was the only person in the underworld who knew his real name. But the person himself said it was not so. Muyong shook his head. You are Wang Chunlin. What is the basis for that? The past you experienced. Coincidentally, Muyong knew Wang Chunglin's name. But he didn't remember how he knew. Your name is in Solomon's Hall of Fame. Wang Chunlin chuckled. Stupid. Solomon's Hall of Fame only shows names you recognize. Certainly, your real name would not have come out there. Isn't that so? Muyong. Those were the only two characters that came out in Solomon's Hall of Fame. 1. However, Muyong had not been left even that. All that had been left was Muyong, no name. Haven't you ever thought this way? Have I really returned to the past? Perhaps isn't it that I am thinking of another person's life as my own? What does that mean? In the forest of death, there was another assassin that was more powerful than me. Number 0. I named the person Muyong. Number 0? There was no number 0 in the forest of death. If so, Muyong had erased Wang Chunlin and became number 0 himself. The great assassins have existed as number 0 to number 10. Scrape. Suddenly, a masked man appeared beside Wang Chunlin. He slowly took off his mask. And the status viewer you are wearing, that is that child's. If you look at the bottom of the status viewer, you will be able to see his real name. The real name of Muyong whom you have not recognized. The man's face was completely unfamiliar to him. However, for some reason, it felt familiar. Muyong returned his horns and then took out the status viewer. Then he checked the other side of it. Howl! Muyong's eyes shook greatly. This was something that could not be. When you arrive at the Blue Temple, it was normal to receive a new status viewer. But, for some reason, Muyong's status viewer had a name on the other side. When he recalled, he remembered opening his eyes faster than everyone else in the beginning. Wang Chunlin also knew that Muyong was shaken. Wang Chunlin looked directly at Muyong and said, "And so, I want to ask." Thud. He came closer by one step. He hadn't been planning to win against Muyong through fighting power from the beginning. It was the reason why Muyong couldn't become his pupil. Also, he was certain that Muyong would be shaken by the truth. Snow had asked him not to reveal the truth, but Wang Chunlin had no plans to conceal it. Wang Chunlin. No, now he who had become just a shadow had asked, "Bastard, who are you?" After receiving the order, he assassinated someone. A complete stranger. He had taken away the life of a person who he didn't know at all. That's who he collected the status viewers from, the people he had killed. He took a peek at their lives, which were written on the status viewer. That was how Muyong was able to protect his consciousness. He thought he had protected it. Kahaha. You are no different than doppelganger, Lucy Fair chuckled. His stomach really hurt so much that he couldn't withstand it. It was because Muyong's state was no different than doppelganger, who stole other people's lives. You can become anyone. You can't become anyone. This was the faith of a doppelganger. The ability to become anyone but unable to keep one unique nature. If the past was all a lie, Muyong couldn't help but rethink about his own nature. Who am I? It wasn't a philosophical question. Muyong just sincerely thought about his appearance. If the words Wang Chunlin spoke of were true, for what did he run towards for so long? Perhaps, this might be related to the reason why Muyong places so much effort into acquiring his own uniqueness. At that moment, Muyong's body started to be sunk into darkness. You could have become a much deeper shadow than anything else. As no one knew you, and even you didn't know about yourself. Wang Chunlin opened his eyes widely. He could have become whatever he wanted, but among them, the one most fitting was a shadow, as a shadow was also just an imitation of others. Perhaps you could say that a shadow reflected Muyong the best. If it is you, you could have become the greatest shadow. Then you would be able to understand the desires of this world. If you listen to the sounds of the world, you would be able to walk the same path as me. The sounds of the world. It was a collection of all kinds of desires. By following the world's desires, Wang Chunlin created the forest of death and killed people. All of it wasn't Wang Chunglin's will. Only the world's will. If Muyong was also to become a shadow, he would walk the same path. Wang Chunlin was anticipating the birth of the greatest shadow. For him, he would give up his life. If he could bring out the shadow in Muyong, he was happy to be a sacrifice. I won. Wang Chunglin's smile deepened. Although Snow had lost, Wang Chunlin had won. Light? Of course, he could become light, but it didn't suit him since birth. Snow had really dreamt of it. The dream existed to be awakened. From the beginning, it didn't make sense for a trial to be made to persuade someone. Snow's thoughts had been too one-sided. On the other hand, Wang Chunlin was strictly based on reality, as Wang Chunglin's goal from the beginning was creating a shadow. Muyong's body was soon wrapped around complete darkness. 5 horns rose up. Normally, at most 4 was possible, but 1 had been added. The horns soon merged into 1. Only a huge horn was left on Muyong's forehead. Also, a black haze even covered Muyong's eyes. An overwhelming presence scattered the area. A black energy dominated all of the surrounding areas. Yes, it's that appearance. A true shadow's appearance. Wang Chunlin was thrilled. He was truly at the climax. The pinnacle point of his plan. If he was just a shadow, Muyong could be seen as a king of shadows. Swoosh! Muyong suddenly made a move. In a blink of an eye, he took away Wang Chunglin's life. And he also took away number zeros like a fly. Swoosh! Swish! The sword didn't stop. Then, Muyong ripped apart 2 corpses with his 2 hands. The 2 bodies couldn't even maintain the shape of a person. They were lumps of meat. Humans had become lumps of meat. Muyong, who had covered himself in blood, started to quietly walk towards Diablo's trial. The world was submerged in water. Afterwards, water evaporated and the world was once again submerged in the fire. Yug! Serafina stood up from her spot. As she looked around, most people had died. It was pure luck for her to be alive after all the suffering. In the end, if Bi Sungmin didn't save her, she would have also had no choice but to be dead. What in the world had happened? Something that had suddenly happened. As she got up fully from her spot, a few who had survived also opened their eyes. Fortunately, Ramiel was among them. What had happened? Serafina let out a sigh of relief. Bi Sungmin made a serious expression while he held his wand. All connection with the master is disconnected. Serafina spoke quietly. When you refer to master, do you mean Muyong? Yes, the master told us to protect you. And he headed towards the altar by himself. That had happened. Serafina's eyes widened. When he suddenly disappeared, she thought something might have happened, but he had headed towards the altar alone. Even the series of events that happened right now should be related to my master. But then, the signal had suddenly been disconnected. It was a disappointment for him to leave without a word, but she couldn't blame him. What seemed like an explosion of the century that happened just now was a bit understandable, as he pointed out that it was related to Muyong. Even in the meantime, he made his servants act to save Serafina. How could she not be moved? However, she was uneasy as he said the connection with Muyong had been disconnected. Then shouldn't we try to find him quickly? My comrades are already looking for him. But Bi Sung-min shook his head. Instantly, Serafina's heart raced. She never thought of Myung's absence. At least to Serafina, he was an angel and a truly strong man. The justice to keep in check with the demon gods by getting the god-killing spear. Also, he was also the man who touched her heart. But for him to disappear. Bi Sung-min spoke the next words bitterly. The altar has disappeared. Wiggle. The holy cloth had moved. The paladins who moved the holy cloth under Serafina's order tilted their heads. This is moving. I told you we can never take it off. Let's go quickly. However, that was all. Serafina's orders were absolute, and even more, this was an item they were sending to the Sage King. It wasn't something that the paladins could decide on their own. Wiggle. Wiggle. But, as time passed, the cloth moved more fiercely. Why is it being like this? Wait, the cloth is. Afterwards, when they were in proximity to Malalan, the cloth had come off completely. Within the cloth, a beautiful girl appeared. The person seemed to be on the borderline between girl and woman. Her name was Hyacinth. When the paladins saw Hyacinth, their eyes loosened. Their bodies shivered and their legs shook. They couldn't get a hold of her senses. I want her. I want to touch her. That girl's body. Thud. Hyacinth touched each cheek of the paladins. Ah! Then, they fell down on the ground and their bodies shivered endlessly. They had continuous seizure and their energy flowed out like rainwater. A man, even a woman, wouldn't be able to withstand Hyacinth's touch. Hyacinth then turned her gaze to the holy cloth. As she touched the holy cloth, it turned into a beautiful white dress. We have to prepare. And we have to welcome him. Hyacinth, who quietly murmured, turned their gaze to look at Malalan. 1. Referring to the two syllables of Myung, which could also be shown using two Chinese characters, as with most Korean names. Chapter 176, Exist Alone, 2. Translation, Nadu. Edit, Lee Suras. Malalan. The biggest holy city and the place that supported humanity. All organizations big or small were connected to Malalan. You could say it was like the center of humanity. In Hyacinth's eyes, Malalan seems like a jewel. I need to give that jewel to him. Hyacinth had been absorbed into the doppelganger, but with Alexandro's help, she was able to revive from the remains of doppelganger. Through that event, she lost her memories, and became a person who gained a completely different power. At this moment, as if it was some sort of order, there were thoughts that filled her head. The world is filled with chaos. He alone will rise up. Prepare to greet him. Hyacinth didn't know who this person was. But, as she tried to remember him, she missed him more and felt sad. In addition, the fear she first felt was imprinted on her. This fear was something that was imprinted on doppelganger and not her. At times she would think of completely emotionless and cold eyes. A fearless and yearnful person would rise alone. He would reappear into this world after realizing his true self and gaining infinite potential. The only person who Hyacinth should follow. For now, it was the waiting phase. However, she had no doubts that he would come to meet her one day. And to do this, Hyacinth was going to prepare a present. Hyacinth drew a picture in thin air. Drawing was Hyacinth's specialty. He liked my drawings. She was unsure of some things, but she was able to remember one thing well. That he had concentrated on Hyacinth's drawings very hard. Faith had become a strength. Soon a drawing popped out from thin air. A beautiful palace carriage and 8 pure white horses to pull. Hyacinth gracefully entered into the carriage. Saintess! Oh, Saintess! The paladins started to worship her. When she entered Malalan, people who saw her kneeled one by one. That was how the 4th Saintess was born. Time regressed. Even when he was first kidnapped by Wang Chunglin 40 years ago. Myung at that place wasn't Myung. However, at that place, he met the real Myung. They say he is the best assassin in the forest of death. They say he killed more than 10,000 people. Before he was brainwashed, there were people who were also gathered near him. Basically, after overexerting the body, the mind followed, and the brainwashing proceeded. At first, there were 200 people, but now there was only 50. 50 people blankly looked at the man who suddenly appeared. The man who was called number 0 quietly followed Wang Chunlin. Would it be easier if I become a skilled assassin? I'm going to get out of this place. The place I should be at isn't a place like this. The people were desperate in order to live. In reality, Wang Chunlin really did torture them with hope, saying how he would let them loose if they tried hard. Then, a man touched Myung's shoulders. Yo, weakling! Why are you zoomed out? You are next to clean the corpse. Go clean it up fast. Weakling! It was a nickname that people called him. In Myung's memory, he became that man. You are too slow. It's amazing how you made it this far. Even though your score is always last. The man's low gaze made him move automatically. It was because he was given the role to clean up the corpses of people who died during training. He gathered the status viewer as he cleaned up the corpses. Although there wasn't much on the people's status viewers, it was sort of like a hobby to him. He was just happy to read it. As if he was reading a story. It was his only resting place within the harsh training. When he was done reading all the stories, he left a drawing on a half-ripped book. His drawing skills weren't great, but it was his only entertainment he could do at this place. It was quite fun to make pictures of a story. Afterwards, he hid them in his secret hideout. If on one night, number 0 didn't come to the place he hid the status viewers, this secret hobby of his could have kept going. The man gulped his saliva. With bruised eyes, the man was looking down on him. Would I die because I hid the status viewers? He had automatically replied to the man's eyes that seemed like they were asking what he was doing. I am reading these stories and drawing pictures. The people's stories. These stories make me strong. They allow me to endure. So, do you want to read them? Slowly he gave the man the picture book he was holding. With the monster's fur, he made a small brush, and instead of paint, he used blood, but it wasn't that horrible to look at. Number 0 slowly scanned his pictures. And soon, the man disappeared in front of his eyes. He took the book, but the man had no intention to stop him. Instead, he placed his hand on his cold neck and let out a sigh. Whew, he really is like a ghost. Swoosh! Did about 30 seconds had passed? Number 0 once again appeared before him. Ha! The man let out a scream and smacked his butt on the ground. Thud! Thud! However, the next action of number 0 was nothing he had expected. He threw few dozens of the status viewers on the ground. And then stretched out a drawing book. Is he telling me to draw? The man gulped his saliva. As he looked at the status viewers dropped on the ground, his nervousness and astonishment couldn't be helped but to be doubled. King Azar. Queen Bihasha. There were also status viewers from those who could also be known to people who just entered the underworld. How could he not be surprised? Those who were all considered the strongest were assassinated by number 0. These were the evidence. His lips dried out. However, he wanted to see. As it was the man's only hobby to draw a picture after reading the stories. When he drew the pictures, number 0 took them. And every week or a month later, number 0 once again brought him more status viewers. When it had repeated about 4 times, the man's training was almost complete. After 2 or 3 training, he would be brainwashed. Only 20 people survived from among 200 people. The number of people will further be reduced to half, and those that survived would become assassins after being brainwashed. What is your name? I don't think it would be number 0. It was something that the man had also felt. And so, he couldn't help but ask. Mew, Young. Number 0 barely spoke. It was very awkward, but the man was excited as it was their first conversation. Myung, no reflection, 1. Not having a reflection? It is truly an assassin-like name. My name is. I can't really remember. These days, my memories have been obscure. The drug he ate during training made him lose his memories. It was the procedural for perfect brainwashing. Everyone knew about this, but to live, they had no choice but to take the pill. Number 0 once again stopped talking. Number 0 was like a child. Perhaps, that is why he focused more on manly behaviors. Since there wasn't a child who didn't like stories and pictures. I don't want to be Myung but Yoeung, exist reflection. I want to at least leave my shadow. I thought it would be possible, but I don't think it would be easy. Haha. As most of the people in this world don't even know who I am. Everyone lost their memories. It was also the same for the man. If there was a man who would remember him until the end, it would only be number 0. So please live until the end. Please remember me. For me, well, it would be hard to survive for a long time as an assassin. He shrugged his shoulders. Then, number 0 gave him a status viewer and a drawing book. Does he want me to draw? He grinned and held the brush. They were in that sort of relationship. As if something existed but didn't. Fortunately, the man's brainwashing was postponed. The holy city of Malalan's few thousand paladins had infiltrated the training ground. Most of the assassins who protected the place were dead, but the man had survived. They were just moved to a different training ground. He gradually raised his assassin senses as he trained with the other trainees. In reality, as time passed, the man lost his identity. The strong drugs were making him stray far from consciousness. Even then the man read the stories. The relationship with number 0 was like his last escape from reality. If he was to lose even that, the man would completely lose all of himself. For the status viewer to hold all the stories that happened to a person you don't know of, isn't it quite interesting? Hey? When did it become night time? What did you say your name was? A monologue. However, everything wasn't more than an echo of chaos. The man's memories were unstable. It was the side effect of the drugs. If this period of time passed, he would be completely brainwashed. He would lose himself and would become a human killing weapon. Number 0 was watching him silently. In the end, the man even forgot number 0's name. Then, number 0 slit his own wrist and made the man drink his blood. Whenever he did, the man was able to return to himself and draw again. Until the day Malalan attacked again, those days repeated. Kill the shadow. Let's regain the god-killing spear. Malalan's attacks were at a huge scale. They made a tightly knitted net and made them unable to escape. It was a movement to catch only Wang Chunglin. When Wang Chunglin stole the god-killing spear at Suicide Hill, Malalan had started a broad-scale attack. As Malalan was focused on regaining the spear, they risked their lives in this matter. The number of paladins and priests who attacked the training ground reached 50,000. However, after realizing that there was a strong seal on the god-killing spear, Wang Chunglin threw it away without hesitation. Of course, he didn't just throw it away. Number 0. He held the god-killing spear and lured the paladins of Malalan. It was to gain time and to make a way. In the process, he gained numerous injuries. Even though he was number 0, he wasn't able to face all 50,000 paladins. Of course, the man's escape was also difficult. Malalan was pure white. They wouldn't let someone who was even a bit stained escape. When Malalan attacked, the man had died once. However, the man came back to life from death. I'm alive. When he opened his eyes again, his surrounding was a hell of fire. Everything was burning. Only corpses were rampant. In addition, the man's heart had a spear of light piercing through. It was the god-killing spear. The seal of it was lifted and revived the man. Then, the spear permeated into the man as if it was being absorbed. What in the world? The man raised his head. His mind felt clear in a long time. However, when he found the person who collapsed beside him, he couldn't help but be greatly surprised for a moment. Muyong. Number 0 was dying. One of his arms was cut off and his waist was also half sliced. Why? The man was torn apart. And he was enraged. I know the brainwashing has been loosened. Now you can live your own life. But, why? After meeting the man, number 0 was slowly finding his identity. He didn't really have a reason to devote his life to Wang Chunlin or to save him. He could have just left, but I was in agony. I was happy to meet you. Please, remember me. With those words as his last, number 0 dropped his head. The man had realized after hearing those words that he wasn't the only one who was afraid to be forgotten. Number 0 was also scared that no one would remember him. Muyong. The man sewed his name in his heart. A moment later, the man lost consciousness. When he woke up, Wang Chunlin was in front of him. What is your name? It was when the brainwashing had progressed. His memories gradually faded. He couldn't remember his name. The man pondered for a moment before he spoke. Muyong. Number 0 had existed. He had died in the attack of Malalan that would happen in the future. Muyong also was Muyong. He was just happy to be Muyong. Didn't he make up his mind like that from the start? However, there were lies mixed within his truth. Wang Chunlin. Everything was part of his plan. Blaze. Muyong was within the flames of Diablo. Diablo's flames were the source. It meant purification. It was the absolute strength that encompassed everything, including the birth and death of life. Afterwards, a spear of light began to come out of Muyong's heart. Gabriel's spear. The god-killing spear was Gabriel's spear. Everything Muyong had experienced might have been started by this spear. And he was able to understand why the Archangel Gabriel chose him. Blaze. Muyong held the spear that came out of his heart. Although we thought Muyong's name originated from no name, it might have originated from no reflection. Chapter 177, Exist Alone, End. Translation, Nadu. Edit, Lee Suras. If it is now. The barrier was punched through. Everything that made him suffocate, disappeared. Muyong tried to make his own skills in this place. To do this, he needed to accept himself. Muyong was right now going through that process. Although he had just inherited his name, he now knew how heavy the weight of this name was. He recognized that everything he had worried about and wanted was true. His past self, who had killed numerous heroes and took their blood, was also still there. All the memories before he inherited the name had just disappeared. In other words, memories were added in place of the memories that were forgotten. The rest was all true. He was no longer shaken. Viewer. Muyong turned his head and looked at the status viewer. Howl, the words written on it. This viewer was truly number 0's watch. Number 7's real name was Howl. After number 0 had died, Muyong took off his status viewer and wore his. He didn't know why he put this on even now when he had returned from the past, but it meant that this status viewer was that important to Muyong. Muyong held the spear and closed his eyes. And slowly, he melted into his own world. Thump. The Fighting King's close combat skills were at a master's level. Whenever he stretched out his hand, the air lurched and created a rough wave. And finally, he tore off the whole body of the masked man. This is the strength of the mystery door. If the rank 12 sage acted, don't you think he would even be able to rip apart a god? The Fighting King raised his chin. A strength that could even kill a god. That was the mystery door's distinct martial skills. Since from the beginning, it was a place made to become a god. Just that, because the succession of the mystery door was always a single student, not much was known. Even the great forest of death would be destroyed like this if they were caught by me. What is the forest of death for you to be so determined? For the first time, B. Susie showed interest. Until now, she hated to even share a conversation with him, but she spoke as she felt that the Fighting King's emotions were out of the ordinary. The Fighting King instantly hardened his expression. The forest of death took my wife and daughter. It is my goal to kill all those who are related to them. If that is your only goal, you can just send me back, right? However, now one more goal is added. Since a successor who could inherit everything about the mystery door has appeared before me, you need to become a sage and kill demon gods. B. Susie pouted her lips. They say a man shouldn't go back on his word. Say whatever you want. I'm fine with you resenting me. However, you need to be the successor of the mystery door. The Fighting King was strongly persistent. From Susie's point of view, the Fighting King was definitely a bad person. But, besides, when he taught her something, he tried his best to accommodate her. Of course, even now, she had people she missed. She was especially worried about her real father, B. Sungmin, and if he was doing well. She even cried and whined, but Susie realized that those things wouldn't work on him. The only way to be free from the Fighting King was for her to quickly achieve the 8th rank of the martial skills. But, where are we going? Heavenly Maid Clan. Heavenly Maid Clan. It is a place made up of just women. At that place, you will learn to be a woman. But I'm already a woman. Susie tilted her head as he spoke of his disingenuous words. Then, the Fighting King spoke. All the martial skills of the mystery door start by knowing yourself. Also, as a benefit, other martial arts skills can be naturally learned. Depending on what you learn at that place, your learning speed from now on will be greatly swayed. B. Susie's eyes widened. Getting stronger by quickly learning. For now, that was her only goal. Arand frowned. Territory Guardian Baltan's expression also hardened. As two shadows invaded the territory, they were repulsed, but someone who shouldn't have died was dead. Sahun. Baltan quietly spoke. The one who directed and was responsible for the Dakibus, the one who was most enthusiastic in reinforcing the territory. The one who had no doubts while following their lord, had died. Also, he was in a good rivalry with Baltan. Something like this cannot happen again. Arand spoke. Arand was the one who won first place in the competition of ranking Muyong had hosted. From the beginning, he was the one who became stronger by just watching Muyong. Before then, he just survived each day in the underground arena by living as a slave. However, now he was in charge of important duties within the territory. When he orchestrated Sahun's funeral, the veins of his neck bulged. There is a need for us to grow our strength more fiercely. It was possible. Especially in Muyong's territory, it was dependent on their resolution. Azura's temple and Merlin's dungeon acted in a very good way to develop. On top, this was the demon god's territory. A place where you needed to always win fights. Let's get stronger. Let's increase our territory. We cannot let Sahun's death be for nothing. Sahun was more passionate than anyone else. He was more worried about the territory and loyal to Muyong than anyone else. Arand and Baltan were going to inherit that mindset of Sahun. When they looked back, there were a lot of flaws. They were slowly becoming lazier and didn't really try to take the lead. Slash. Thump. And it was at that moment. When Arand's short speech ended, a huge pillar was placed on Azura's temple. However, this wasn't the first time they had seen this occurrence. It was already the second time. When Muyong had killed Moon, the cult leader of the Sky Devil, something like this had also occurred. And the guardian of the territory became much stronger. But, if something like this had happened again, did the Lord destroy another great enemy? Ahum and have given us a gift. All kinds of flowers were fully bloomed on the new pillar of the temple. Then, small letters appeared in front of all the citizens. Is this a wreath? Baltan quietly murmured. It was so. This pillar was like a wreath Muyeong sent for Sehun's funeral. The dragon lord Hansung went straight far west. All the land in the west were floating in the sky, that it was also called the floating garden, and the owner of this place was the king of the dragons. The size of the dragon king was colossal. A huge creature that seemed like it would even pierce through the sky. In front of it, Hansung and Arkaza seemed very small. I found it. The owner of the sword fragment is one of the masters of the darkness, named King Slayer. It was a piece of information he barely found as he wandered in the sage's room and other places. The Dragon Lord was also familiar with the masters of the darkness, as he had received rewards from them a few times. King Slayer. If he had stepped up, this means that we need to prepare for an upheaval. As the sword fragment is a warning. What kind of upheaval will happen? The birth of the 73rd demon god. His name is Diablos. He is a wicked demon god who has the fire of creation and destruction. Also, a few demon gods are looking for the Ars Nova. Ars Nova, the Remingtons. 73rd demon god? It was definitely a surprising event, but Hansung read as an ominous sign while he was coming here. Perhaps, it was linked to the birth of Diablos. However, more than that, he was more focused on Ars Nova. All demon gods were sealed by Lemegidon. However, their seal broke and they had settled in this underworld. Among them, it was known that Baal had the cover of Lemegidon. But, there were a lot of contents that were missing. Among them was Ars Nova. It was told that miracle-like strong spells was engraved on the Ars Nova. If they can find the Ars Nova, they can break the wall of the Blue Temple. If Merlin, the guardian at this place and the balancer of this world, died, then the world would accelerate into destruction. Then is King Slayer looking for Ars Nova. It was a routine procedure for the demon gods to look for Ars Nova. As long as Baal has the cover of Lemegidon, King Slayer can't stop him. He would also know of this truth. Then, why would someone who needed to be within the darkness appear? King Slayer can manipulate time. Only he can figure out about abnormalities regarding time. If he had acted first-hand, this would also be related to time. Even the king of the dragons didn't exactly know about all the truth. He was omnipotent, but not all-knowing. Hansung once again nodded his head. Please lead me to the path I need to go. Gather the fragments of fissures. Although it won't allow you to stop them from finding Ars Nova, it will help you delay them. Arkaza will lead you. Roar! Arkaza made a loud roar. Then, the king of the dragons finished speaking. However, Arkaza alone will be difficult. Although you have earned a mighty sword, you still haven't earned a shield yet. Go to the Spring of Light right away and make the Dragon of Light Shandalton submit to you. Hansung widened his eyes. The King of Dragons granted him the right to make a contract with a second dragon. To prepare for the upheaval, the King of Dragons had started to make a strong move. Including the King of Dragons, the four beings with divinity. The Master of all the mountains, the Death Lord, and the Child of Moon were balancers that kept the balance in all four directions. In the middle of it, there was the Blue Temple and Merlin. They couldn't act on their own. And so, like this, they gave others their strength and made them prepare. Of course, it was only Hansung's responsibility to make Shandalton submit to him. Shandalton was one of the greatest dragons that could even easily face Arkaza. If he wasn't careful, Hansung could even die. I'll go right away. However, Hansung didn't care. He was a dragon lord. A man who did not know when to give up. And here, there was another man who didn't know when to give up. Muyeong swung his spear within the flames of Diablos. Gabriel's spear told Muyeong many things. It was also a great help in making Muyeong's own skills. The state of selflessness. He forgot about himself and everything else, and only perfected his skills. He created, discarded, and then recreated. He didn't even know how much time had passed. However, this process was something that was necessary for Muyeong. For him to forge his own path. and to finally find his own true uniqueness. Now, he wouldn't wander around. Muyeong would only go one path. And finally, he saw true essence within the flames. A swordsmanship that was extremely pure and showed Muyeong's colors to the maximum. Muyeong's swordsmanship. He placed his name. The name Muyeong was like his own proof that couldn't be removed even if he wanted to. Also, although it was a sword skill, it was like the combination of all the skills. It was the final product after he combined his knowledge and the knowledge he learned later through Gabriel. As he used his swordsmanship, the flames of Diablos split. The flame's essence that didn't budge once it started to burn was moved by Muyeong. A moment later, Muyeong took a step out of the flames. When he came out of the flames, Muyeong's vigor was more organized than before. His outer appearance didn't show anything. He was like a normal person. The eyes that looked like the abyss and his murderous spirit, everything was erased. However, the power hidden within it was incomparable to the past. At last, he had won over the trial and found his own path. With this, Muyeong was able to exist alone. Chapter 178, The Traces of Diablo, 1. Translation, Nadu. Edit, Hungry Panda. The darkness that ate up the whole body had all disappeared. In that state, Muyeong looked around. Huge flames. These flames were all purification of Diablo. Only those who have overcome the flames had the qualification to live. Muyeong had now earned that right. Brrr. That wasn't all. Muyeong reaped the flames. Then, Diablo's flames started to be sucked into Muyeong. When it happened, his body bloated up as if it was going to explode, but Muyeong didn't show any expression. Diablo's fire is the start of all fire. The flames that existed immemorial. That was the reality of the flames Diablo had. There wasn't really a chance to earn a flame like this. Even more, Muyeong would be the only one who would be resistant to Diablo's flames. Even if it wasn't full resistance, it would be possible for him to resist a considerable amount of damage. Diablo was strong enough to even block Baal's attacks. Flames like them. How could he not want it? Nevertheless, Muyeong was nothing more than ordinary. At least by looking at his outer appearance, there was no trace. If he had swallowed flames this size, normally the effects would reflect like a mirror and appear, but there was nothing like that at all. As you come close to extreme, you become ordinary. The Dragon Lord's sword was like that. He threw away all kinds of ways and was able to gain a classless swordsmanship. Although his movements were all over the place like a beginner's, the purification that was hidden within it was incomparably stronger. Why how was also like this? If he was good, evil, strong, or weak. If it wasn't something Muyeong wanted to show, no one would be able to easily recognize it. Then, Muyeong went towards the end of the room. At that place, he was able to find a huge egg that was engulfed by a small flame. Snow. Snow was the successor of Garuda. Also, Garuda was a sun bird. Yacha. So, when Wang Chunlin died, there was a message that popped up, but when Snow died, there wasn't any. The reason was right in front of his eyes. Did she not die? Maybe it was due to the influence as Garuda's successor, it seemed like she didn't die after one death. The nature of the sun bird allowed it to resurrect if it was near the fire. Bongwang, red bird, and phoenix were all the same. Although their names were different, they were all concluded as the sun bird. Muyeong looked at the egg for a moment. The size was as big as most humans, but he heard breathing of a weak living thing. He kept touching anguish but then shook his head. Didn't only light flow out of Snow's corpse and was engraved on this egg? It seemed like Snow continued to be born again like this as generations passed down. So that's why no one in the past knew who Snow really was. Muyeong placed his hand on the egg. If an unauthorized person touched it, it would become a terrifying fire that would burn the person's whole body, but Muyeong was the ruler of flames. These kinds of flames couldn't produce a large impact on Muyeong. Blaze. Then, greater flames engulfed Muyong. The flames poured on Muyong like the time Gabriel's spear did and reminded him of a new past. In the past, Snow died when the demon gods invaded. However, she was born again. However, Snow was different in many ways from the previous Snow. Snow who was born again had a lot of fears. She didn't step up and just watched the world perish from afar like a third person. Among those people, Muyong was one of them. The greatest assassin. The man who died after demolishing the forest of death. He killed so many heroes. Even the Dragon Lord who was considered the hope of humanity was killed by his hand. However, there was definitely a chance to save Muyong. If Muyong was saved, other people could have also been saved. But, Snow didn't act. The forest of death burned in flames, the great calamity started, the Dragon Lord died, the balancers of all direction died off one by one, and finally, even when Merlin the guardian of the world died, Snow just stayed quiet. Snow watched the upheavals that happened afterwards. After killing all living things, the demon gods wanted to remain as true gods themselves. And so, they summoned all other gods. Even including fake gods. It was terrifying. As their upheaval was beyond one's imagination. And so, Snow counted as everything she had seen as a dream. After the world was completely covered in darkness, Snow woke up after a small light broke out. And afterwards, she started to prepare. Diablo who she had seen when the gods were summoned. She decided to summon his strong powers when something happened. However, even in this lifetime, Snow had died. Not by a demon god but by Muyong. Not a dream, but reality. Crack. Crack. As Muyong placed his hand on the egg started to crack. Then, the egg completely cracked and within it, a girl appeared. Plump. A naked girl fell to the ground helplessly. The body looked a bit younger than Snow he saw from the outside. It was this. Snow in front of him was the Snow he remembered in his memories. The Snow he saw from the outside was for some odd reason older than the Snow in his memories. She seemed a bit more mature than when he first saw her, so he was a bit puzzled. Perhaps, as generations were passed down, the age of their body seems to decrease. Snow's body didn't age no matter how much time passed. That meant, there was a certain number of lives she had. However, he needed to keep an eye to see if only the age of their bodies decreased or not. Boing! Boing! It was at that moment. Armful's cradle spirit came down from Muyong's head. And it entered Snow's body. Swung! A gleam of light spread everywhere. Afterwards, it gradually reduced in size and was fully absorbed into Snow's body. Blink! A moment later, Snow gradually opened her eyes. And as she laid there, looked up at Muyong. Then, with an innocent smile on her face, Snow spoke. Dad! Dad? Muyong frowned. It wasn't because he wasn't familiar with the word. It was because that word came out of Snow's mouth. Pa! I'm not your father. Tilt. Snow poked Muyong's cheek with her finger. And smiled shyly. She was no different than pure white, but it seemed like she couldn't understand well yet. Swoosh! Muyong took out anguish. Although he didn't have a lot of experience killing someone who died once, it wasn't like he couldn't do it again if he needed to. To be exact, he took anguish towards the middle of her forehead. Pa! Then, Snow touched the sword as if it was a toy. For her to not even know murderous intent and hostility. Was it not Snow but Armful's cradle? Didn't Muyong also see how Armful's cradle entered Snow? Perhaps the two might be mixed. However, Armful's cradle's awareness was very shallow. You could say that it was the height of simplicity, but its fondness towards Muyong was similar. He was unable to organize his thoughts because he was also able to see parts of Snow in the past who was pure white and sacrificed herself for humanity. Muyong clicked his tongue and sheathed anguish. And when he started walking after turning around, Snow tried her best to follow him. Thud. The altar's door that was closed was opened. Muyong slowly walked out. Then, Muyong couldn't help but frown as he took a look around. It isn't Suicide Hill. The surrounding was filled with turquoise. A place with a small park and a huge spring existed. This couldn't be the Suicide Hill. It was impossible to make the place that was bombarded by Diablos come back to life. Pa! Dad! Muyong turned around. Snow, whose age of the body became slightly younger, followed Muyong and called him Dad. It seemed like her memories weren't perfect. No, it seemed like all of it had been erased. Of course, although she had forgotten all of her interactions with Muyong, it seemed like she had the very basic knowledge to live. What he meant was things like eating and pooping. She was like a newborn baby who only had the instincts. It wasn't an act. As there was no way Muyong wouldn't be able to not differentiate. And so, he decided to just leave her be. She had no ill intentions and he even had the slight expectations that there will be a chance to find new aspects. As no one really knew Snow. Swoosh! Something flew through the wind. Muyong slowly raised his hand and caught the item that flew in. An arrow. A warning or a threat. Muyong looked towards the direction the arrow flew in. Normally, he wasn't able to see anything, but Muyong saw it clearly in his eyes. A couple of elves with golden hair were hiding in the forest. When elves hid in the forest, most people weren't able to find them. The easiest way to find elves was to burn the forest down. Muyong raised his hand. Blazi. Then, fierce flames were created on top of Muyong's hand. Although it was nothing compared to Diablo's, he tried his best to create something similar to it. It was Muyong's own flames which he created after combining few skills, placing Gabriel's feather, and analyzing the source of flames. It was called the Holy Fire. The Holy Fire instantly sprang up and burned the forest. However, it didn't spread. He just burned the place where exactly the elves were located. This strength. You fire dragons! Are you attacking to go after Shandalton's fortunes again? The elves were naked. They returned to their natural states because their clothes and weapons also burned when the trees burned down. Fire dragons! Muyong smirked. For a day to come when he was mistaken for a dragon. Fire dragons were a type of dragons that was famous for its ill tempers. They were able to use flames and lived near volcanoes. Thud. Muyong walked. He went right in front of them and asked. Where is this place? Are you saying you came without knowing? This place, the Spring of Light, is ruled by Shandalton. This isn't a place where a fire dragon could do what he wants. Shandalton and the Spring of Light. Although he had heard of them, he couldn't remember them well. As even in the past, the dragon and the area weren't well known. There weren't any dragons who played an important role in the fight with the demon kings and the demon god, against all other species. They have all acted alone and were destroyed. Either way, the Spring of Light was very far from the Suicide Hill. I would rather be closer to the Noble City. Noble City was a huge city that was comparable to the Great City. Basically, all the 5 great clans besides the Lawless clan were here. Besides them, all kinds of clans had their headquarters at the Noble City. Crunch! It was at that moment. Snow all of a sudden bit the neck of the elf who spoke. Cough! Pa! Pa! Snow seemed to be very angry. She grabbed the elf's whole body and bit his neck in a persistent manner that the elf was unable to handle it. In the end, the elf was only able to continue speaking when Muyong forcefully took her off. Ugh, I don't know what you, fire dragons, are after, but while we are alive, you won't be able to take anything from Shandalton. Muyong rubbed his chin. He kept saying fire dragons. It seemed like there wasn't just one fire dragon who visited this place. That meant there was something hidden here that the fire dragons wanted. I came here through Diablo's temple. Muyong concentrated. However, he couldn't feel any signs of Diablos. But, he was able to know about the remaining remnants of Diablo. Diablo had gone through this place. It was the reason why Myung arrived at Spring of Light instead of Suicide Hill. It seemed like even in the future, he would have some kind of relationship with Diablo. Also, there was a high chance that the fire dragons were also after the remnants Diablo left. Pa! It was at that moment. Snow poked Myung's back. Kai-a-a-a-ok. When he turned around, a huge flame covered Myung. They were unfathomable flames that a fire dragon shot from the sky. Chapter 179, The Traces of Diablo, 2. Translation, Nadu. Edit, Hungry Panda. Myung was also aware of this. Before Snow noticed and warned him, he was able to instinctively sense the appearance of fire dragons. Was this also due to Diablo's flames he had absorbed? Blaze. The surrounding area was burned up. Myung was in the middle of it. However, the flames poured out by the fire dragon didn't go past Myung. It was because Myung's whole body was absorbing the flames. The fire dragon Gurkha was younger compared to most dragons. You could tell just by looking at its size. However, even Gurkha's flames helped raise his stats. However, there was a limit. No stats were raised after a few messages popped up. Did a fire dragon stop the flames of a fire dragon? That's Gurkha. The elves were terrified by Myung's appearance and the sudden attack of Gurkha. In reality, there were a lot of dragons that were aggressive, but they were quite prudent. They didn't just attack all of a sudden. Perhaps a different kind of energy Myung had offended Gurkha. Myung slowly stretched his hand. He absorbed the fire Gurkha had. As he opened his mouth slightly and ate up the flames in his mouth, he felt an astringent taste. The taste of fire. The tip of Myung's lip lightly went up. For a fire to have a taste. However, Gurkha's flame was bitter. It hadn't ripened yet. On top, it meant that he was able to absorb flames. A fire weaker than me. Blaze. The holy fire was created in Myung's right hand. The holy fire absorbed Gurkha's flames and surrounded the place. In an instant, its size increased, and in that state, Myung's holy fire was thrown towards Gurkha. Kai-a-ok. Clank. 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 Just because they were fire dragons, didn't mean they only used fire. Fundamentally, the dragons were able to use specialized true magic. A net made out of the fire was spread around fire dragon Gurkha. A barrier like a web was placed. However, the holy fire ripped the web apart. The dense and strong web instantly became tattered by the invader. Blaze. Soon, the holy fire was carried onto Gurkha's wings. As Myung opened his fist, the holy fire burned Gurkha's entire body. Kai-ak. A fire dragon, is burning. This is ridiculous. The elves who were watching widened their eyes. They couldn't speak any further. The fire dragons were creatures that were born from fire. Of course, they had the immunity of fire. They occupied and lived in one volcano. They also absorbed fire and created them. Their scales that covered their entire body was especially strong against heat. That should be the case. Thud. Gurkha fell towards the ground. He didn't die. He was screaming out loud as he twisted his body. Maybe it's because he is a young dragon, but hunting isn't difficult. Currently, Myung's fighting power was already above the top 10 humans. The Dragon Lord Hansung. Only about his level would be able to stop Myung. However, if he was to fight Hansung with all he had, Myung thought his win rate would be around 90%. If Arkaza fought with Hansung, then the probability would be 50%. You would be able to hunt a young dragon like Gurkha with a well-made party, even if you weren't in the top 10. I should be able to create a bone dragon. Myung hasn't made a bone dragon yet. There was no reason for him to not be able to make a bone dragon if he took away Gurkha's life right now and left just its bones. However, it was true that he felt a bit disappointed. Whatever it was, if you created it first you would gain that much more. Gurkha was young for a dragon. It wasn't fully grown. Pa! It was right then when Snow poked Muyung's side. When he turned his head, Snow was drooling as she looked at fire dragon Gurkha. They say Garuda ate dragons. Muyung rubbed his chin. Although it was only a story, Garuda was a dragon-eating being. Garuda's successor would therefore also be in a close relationship with the dragons. As they called them fire dragons, one should be okay as an experiment. Muyung was planning to stay in the spring for a bit. He was going to find the rest of Diablo's traces and hunt the fire dragons that invade and make a bone dragon from the one best among them. Also, he was curious about Snow's true identity. Like Muyung, Snow was also from the past. Was that why? As he looked further into Snow, he thought he was able to find certain truth. Muyung nodded his head. Pa! Snow smiled brightly. Then, she ran towards Gurkha. At the same time, a huge white crow image appeared on Snow's back. However, the head and wings were bright gold. As the crow-like image popped out, it opened its mouth and tried to swallow Gurkha. Garuda! After seeing this, Muyung gulped his saliva. The size was smaller than the stories, but there was definitely godliness in that crow. Perhaps, bigger than Lucifer's. So, Muyung was unable to help but think it was Garuda. It was hidden cleverly that even Muyung was unable to sense it. But, as it tried to swallow the fire dragon, it showed its form without hesitation. He hasn't seen anything like this even in the past. Does it mean she wasn't just simply a successor? The past has changed, and Snow had also faced a lot of life-changing events herself. Although it probably wasn't real, she had earned the powers that Garuda's form had. Gulp! Then, Garuda swallowed Gurkha. Literally, Garuda swallowed it in one gulp. Ah! After, Snow fell to the ground and let out a scream. Soon, something that wiggled in her back popped out. A pair of small red wings sprang up. It seems like she didn't lose all her wings. Snow lost her wings as she was born again. No, Muyung thought she did. However, as she absorbed Gurkha, a pair of red wings appeared. It seemed like that sort of wing appeared when she eats a dragon. Although it was at most the size of an adult arm, it was a surprising change. Later, Snow got up. And then looked at Muyung. Pa! As if she wasn't in pain at all, she quickly approached Muyung and stood in front of him. She certainly didn't seem to have any ill intentions. Perhaps it was due to the assimilation with the armful's cradle spirit, but she had only infinite goodwill. At least, he was able to trust armful's cradle. Who are you guys? The leader of elves alternately looked at Muyung and Snow. However, his tone was different from the past. He became politer. As Muyung didn't just make a blow on the fire dragon but even ate it up, in their eyes he could only be seen as an overwhelming being. An ancient class dragon. Or, something similar to that. It seems like they don't know about Diablo. If they did, they would have made a reaction when they saw Muyung's fire. That meant that they were clueless about Diablo. It seemed like he had no choice but to look for its traces alone. Muyung made a short reply. I'm going to stay here for a little while. Then, he turned around and walked towards the forest. The flames that were burning in the surrounding instantly returned to Muyung. After seeing this, no one was able to say anything regarding Muyung's reply. The elves with the golden hair gathered at a huge house. Their number was about 300. However, the mood was very serious. Wouldn't it be an ancient fire dragon? That has at least lived 10,000 years. I'm certain by looking at the transformation magic it was using. As one elf asked, the old elder elf replied. I'm not sure if he is really a dragon, or not. However, as I can feel a similar purity as Shandalton, if he was a fire dragon, it is odd why he would attack another fire dragon. Perhaps it's because he is after the same thing the fire dragon is after? As you know, the dragons don't normally stick together. They don't go easy with each other just because they are the same species. However, we don't even know what they are after. That's the biggest problem. That even they themselves didn't know what that was. If they did, they could prepare for what they knew, but because they didn't know, they couldn't help but just fight. Then, someone had another opinion. Let's give it to him. Although we don't know what it is, he would be able to find it. And if it is him, wouldn't he help stop other fire dragons? The elder closed his eyes. The fire dragons are selfish beings. We don't know when they will make this place a sea of fire. So, we need to let them know that this isn't a place they shouldn't burn down. How? By giving them the sense that you are happy at this place. Just until Shandalton comes back if we pretended to serve them. It was a shocking opinion. The elder grunted as he crossed his arms. It was basically a choice to select the lesser evil to stop the worse. The elf persuaded the elder. We have lasted this long because of Shandalton's blessing and spring of light. But, if we continue like this we would lose both. Shandalton's place and the place we have worked on for over 1,000 years will be lost. A moment. If we forsake our pride for just really a moment, we can save them both. I don't think this is a choice I can make on my own. The elder shook his head in the end. And then started to speak. Gather all the elves. We are going to start a vote. We will decide if we are going to serve him or be enemies with him afterwards. There were about 4,000 golden elves that resided near the Spring of Light. They started the vote quicker than any other time. After only half a day, the result was given, and they came to a decision. The house given to Muyong was a house made by weaving large trees. The inside was clean and there was a soft bed and a variety of decorations. Muyong first sat on the bed and then touched his status viewer. It was to check his changes so far. The very first, the achievement effect he earned by absorbing Diablo's flames. Achievement effect Ruler of Flames, S++, all pure stats plus 40. Good. Muyong nodded his head. It was almost impossible to find an item that was greater than an S rank. The achievement effect was more so. But, ++ was added to it. This was incomparable to just an S rank. The fact that it raised its pure stats meant that there was that much meaning. However, this wasn't the only change. To check the rest, Muyong turned his status viewer. Class effect. Death Lord, Lord class, Kingslayer, Lord class, Archangel, Lord class. Stats. Strength 540, 325 plus 215, Agility 537, 333 plus 204. Stamina 510, 340 plus 170, Intelligence 539, 284 plus 255. Wisdom 500, 315 plus 185, Fighting Aura 375, 215 plus 160. Magic Resistance 565, 165 plus 400, Spirit Ability 450, 300 plus 150. Evil Tendency 490, 360 plus 150, True. Divine Powers 544, 444 plus 100, True. Fire Attributes 490, 390 plus 98. Total level, 542. Special note, Lucifer's strength is sealed. You have succeeded Gabriel's strength. You are creating Muyong's sword. The god-killing spear is engraved in your heart. Not just fire attributes but true. Fire attributes. Even divine powers had that sort of name attached. Muyong smiled. Thank you Jonathan Hurd for the excellent explanation of Muyong's past. I have posted his comment below for those who are still confused about Muyong's past. So my understanding of things is the real-world events went like this. 1. Muyong comes to Underworld and is kidnapped by Wang Chunlin. 2. Muyong starts his training/brainwashing. 3. Muyong picks up a habit of reading the status viewers of people. 4. Number 0 catches what Muyong is doing. 5. Number 0 gives Muyong a few status viewers of the people number 0 killed. 6. Battle at Suicide Hill, first timeline not the one we're reading, happens. 7. Wang Chunglin sends out number 0 and a few others as sacrifices to save his own skin. 8. Number 0 wins battle and revives dead Muyong with Gabriel's spear. 9. Muyong is revived and takes the name Muyong for himself when Wang Chunglin finds Muyong standing there. 10. Muyong is now trained to be the ultimate assassin by Wang Chunglin. 11. He spends the next 40 years fighting for the Forest of Death till he breaks free and destroys the Forest of Death. 12. Story we're reading now. So the way I see it is Wang Chunglin messed with Muyong's memories but not as extremely as you might think. What Wang Chunglin changed was steps 2 to 9. Muyong really did fight for 40 years and kill all those people and read their status viewers. Muyong was the one who killed Dragon Lord and the other prominent heroes in the past life. All Wang Chunglin really took from Muyong was the memory of Muyong's only friend in the underworld, the reason why Muyong had a habit of reading status viewers, and the origin of Muyong's name. Honestly, if you think about it, only messing with those things makes sense. If Muyong really didn't accomplish any of the kills, but just had the memories infused into him and still managed afterwards to be able to train to his current level of Badassitted, then that would mean that Wang Chunglin should have been able to mass-produce killing machines like no one's business. Really all Chunglin did was take out the pieces in Muyong that stimulated his humanity and would get in the way of the brainwashing. He couldn't strip the name or the habit of reading the status viewers. Those were too deeply ingrained and honestly didn't seem like they would interfere. He took out the emotional connection to the actions though. What has been unlocked for Muyong is now his origins. All the power he accrued before has always been Muyong's own. The skills and knowledge is the same. It was stolen but Muyong rightfully stole it from those he killed and pieced it together. Chapter 180, The Traces of Diablo, 3. Translation, Nadu. Edit, Lee Suras. It seemed like that sort of name was added because the fire attribute and divine powers Muyong had were purer than others. The divine powers of Gabriel and the fire attribute that was added when he absorbed the flames of Diablos were definitely different from the normal. His main stats were all over 500. Lucifer's sealed power was the only thing that concerned Muyong. Only if I could fully absorb Lucifer's power. The demigod-like power Lucifer had was tempting for Muyong. If he could absorb that enormous power, he was 100% certain he would be able to win against both Arkaza and the Dragon Lord. Lucifer's strength was that great. As Muyong got stronger, he was able to feel Lucifer's strength through his skin. However, Lucifer was silent. It was because there was nothing Lucifer could do about Muyong who earned Gabriel's strength. He was just doing his best to keep his own strength. However, this was also just a matter of time. Muyong was certain that he would be able to use Lucifer's strength in the near future. As Muyong's divine power and soul became stronger, Lucifer's position gradually disappeared. So, Lucifer chose silence. Would he cooperate with Muyong or lose even his soul? Muyong got up from his seat. Lots of people were gathering in the surrounding. Sign of elves. More than 4,000. About that number of elves surrounded the house Muyong was staying in. They didn't even try to hide. They bluntly surrounded the place. Perhaps they decided to make Muyong their enemy? Certainly, the golden hair elves weren't weak. If about 4,000 gathered, they could kill an average fire dragon. But, if they did decide to go against him, he could only say that they were really stupid. The godliness Muyong showed was unstoppable, with the strength to just kill an average fire dragon being inadequate. They would have also witnessed it as well. Muyong softly opened the door. Then, a magnificent sight appeared before him. All elves started to kneel one by one. And the only elf with white hair, the elder, approached Muyong and kneeled right in front on him. Our race has decided to serve you. Please tell us your name. He felt a heavy mood, but was it because of this? Myung looked at the elder with interest. They wouldn't have just suddenly decided to serve him. When Myung looked into the elder's eyes, he could get a glimpse of his years of experience and his wisdom. He wasn't fascinated by Myung's strength. This was a deal. He had made a choice after seeing how Myung didn't kill them when they first met. At first, they killed depending on their gains, but now, when Myung didn't think of them as his enemy, they learned to show tolerance. Myung. Myung, are you an ancient dragon? Dragon. A dragon. It was natural to make such mistake by watching the strength Myung had shown. It was a place he needed to stay for a while. On top, he didn't want any hindrance while he was hunting the fire dragon. Think whatever you want. He didn't care how they thought of him. Myung wasn't the type to be swayed by how others thought of him. He was the type who strictly walked his own path. I'm late in introducing myself. I'm the elder of the village, Dexter. If there is anything lacking, please let me know. We will try our best to find what you need. He was able to feel his heart and soul. It felt odd to just ignore his words. The materials to create Immortal King's equipment. He earned the essences of the Immortal King when he faced Moon and Doppelganger. However, he just had the essences and didn't have anything else to complete the foundation. He didn't really have the materials to complete it. Undoubtedly, the heart and bones of a dragon should be enough, but Myung decided to pursue a greater greed. The high elves who oversees the Spring of Light should have it. He spoke as if he already knew what he was talking about. High elves were divine beings. They were like the emotional anchor of the elves. Because they were told to have the blessings of the moon, they had the tattoo of a moon symbol on their body. However, their numbers were so small that the elves had to protect them. The elder was just a figurehead. The true leaders were the high elves. If the elder shook his head right then, he would have no choice but to find it forcefully. But, thankfully, the elder didn't do this. We do. He spoke calmly without any confusion or surprise. As expected. Myung nodded his head. Bring it to me. As Myung spoke, the elder gave a look to an elf behind him. The elf behind him instantly got up and quickly disappeared to some place. The Spring of Light became known through high elves. The Spring of Light. And the Light Dragon Shandalton. They were all not very known in the past. They were mentioned sometimes just from some place. Nonetheless, they were known due to the high elves who manage the Spring of Light. An adventurer passed out near the Spring of Light after a grave wound when a high elf approached the man and gave him a potion. But, this potion wasn't ordinary, it was an elixir. An elixir. A treasure among treasures that was told to save a life as long as the person wasn't already dead. The more surprising thing was that the high elf didn't just have one but a few bottles of it. The adventurer got greedy, but after looking at the place where the moon tattoo was engraved, he gave up. I'm Anne. A beautiful woman who graciously bowed her head. She had a moon symbol engraved on her forehead. As the moon tattoo got closer to the head, it meant that the high elf was that much stronger. Because she was given that great of a blessing, she couldn't help but be that strong. Myung looked at the woman who introduced herself as Anne with a slight surprise. This place was safe until now because of you. The fire dragons were hot-tempered. There would be nothing weird if this place was already razed to the ground. As they didn't have respect and have a reason, they wouldn't have left this place alone just because it was the land of Shandalton. However, the reason was right in front of him. Anne. She was a superior high elf. A being who was able to fight even a fire dragon. Nevertheless, although she can't be an opponent against an ancient dragon like Arkaza, if Anne was to collaborate with the elves, they would be able to easily take down the fire dragon Myung had faced. My strength has all been exhausted. At most, I can stop once or twice more. Anne pointed towards her pattern. The pattern had lost most of the light. There was circumstantial evidence that greater strength was used than gained when receiving the moonlight. She spoke with a serious look. I heard there was something you wanted from me. Anne looked at Muyong. A nobleness no other elf could come near. It would have been difficult for a normal person to even meet her eyes, but Muyong's eyes were the same as hers. I need a leather that received the blessing of the moon and some clothing made with that leather. I would like it if you would make them yourself. There was no better leather to patch an armor than this. The blessing of the moon. Even more, if it was from a high elf like Anne, the concentration itself would be different for that blessing. The moon was also the strength of yin, so it would be a good match with the strength of the immortal king. However, it was very rude for him to ask about this. Elves normally didn't weave clothes for others. They were known to make only their own clothing and the ones for their children and their spouse if they find someone they want to live the rest of their life with. That's not possible. The elder stepped up. Muyong frowned. I wasn't speaking to you. This also isn't a favor. Muyong's whole body was in flames. Then, a strong murderous spirit surrounded the place. Cough. Grrrrrrk. The elves fell one by one as they grabbed their chest. However, Muyong's eyes only looked at Anne. Then, Anne replied. I understand. I'll make the clothes for you myself. Anne. Elder, it's all right. It's just weaving clothes. He isn't an elf, no. Anne also didn't put too much meaning behind it. This type of tradition only applied to elves. Muyong wasn't an elf and therefore, wasn't accountable for tradition. Muyong didn't care what kind of interpretation was given. He just cared about whether or not she would make the materials for the immortal king's equipment. Muyong once again absorbed the flames. He also killed his murderous spirit. Then, the elves were able to breathe. However, to do this, I need to measure your size. Would it be okay if I touch your body for a moment? You may. Then, I'll visit once I arrange everything I need. Muyong nodded his head. Then, turned his body and went back into his house. The elves worked hard to make Muyong as comfortable as he could be. The fire dragons didn't invade every day. Thanks to this, Muyong was able to rest although he didn't plan on doing so. Tap. Muyong cast a fishing line on the spring of light. Fishing. He was in thought for a moment as he hanged a fishing rod made of bamboo. Fishing for fish and not humans. From his memories, this was something he hadn't done before. While Anne measured his size and made his leather, she asked Muyong to get her a sacrifice needed to place the blessing of the moon. The fish caught is different depending on who's fishing at the spring of light. He wasn't sure if this was true. When it was decided, he would always catch a certain fish. So, Muyong needed to catch his own fish. He wanted to just smash down on the spring and pick up a dead fish, but this fish was necessary for a sacrifice. He needed to find a fish that matched him, and was alive. However, no matter how much time had passed, the fishing rod didn't move at all. Was it due to the energy flowing from Muyong? However, from the outside, Muyong looked very ordinary. Unless he forcefully lets out his strength, no one would know of Muyong's true strength. It wasn't different for a fish. That was why Muyong had sat on one place for hours while looking at his fishing rod. Pa! Pa! Snow joked around beside him. After making a crown by weaving flowers, she placed it on top of Muyong's head. At the same time, butterflies flew towards Snow. Among them, a few butterflies sat on top of the crown Muyong wore. Hey! Muyong was greatly surprised by this phenomenon. Normally, no living thing would come near Muyong because of his murderous spirit. No matter how hard he tried to hide this energy, it showed that even small bugs avoided him. However, now it could be hidden even if he was conscious of it. By seeing how butterflies approach him and sit on his head, it certainly seemed to be true. A suppressed stat? Muyong tilted his head for a moment and soon realized. Did I just run too much until now? He just ran crazily until now. Thanks to this, he became that much stronger, but it seemed like he needed a rest. Nonetheless, there wasn't a time he rested like this after he had returned from his memories. Myung tried to enjoy this rest although it may be short. It's hard. Despite all this, he felt anxious as he stayed still. Laughter came out as he thought he couldn't even fully enjoy a period of rest. At the same time, ring! The fishing rod shook. Myung quickly raised the fishing rod. It's big. He could feel the size of the fish as soon as he grabbed hold of the fishing rod. A heavy feel. Thud. Thug. At long last, when he raised his fishing rod, a huge fish collapsed in front of Myung. The size was so big that it seemed that it was at least 20 m long.